Hello and welcome to today's revision screencast. The focus is going to be on personality. So if you should have a quick look at the specification then, what we have in front of us. So we've got, obviously we've got to define personality. Then we've got the three different theories that kind of explain slightly different approaches towards how personality is formed. So we've got trait theory, social learning theory and interactionist theory. And then we've got to understand kind of six personality types, okay, that fall under the trait theory, but I'm going to do those discreetly just so we have an understanding. You're most likely to get these questions as a 1 or 2 marker, so we'll have a look at those from there. Okay, so we're going to start off by having a look at these personality types. Okay, so let's have a look at those to begin. So definition then, there's various definitions. So you can have characteristics that make a person unique. I mean, that's the one I'm going to go with for this one. So from there, then that's an example of a personality definition. And then let's have a look at these personality types. So Eysenck theorists, you will not need to know that, but they might reference them in the exam question. Proposed that our kind of personality kind of falls in like kind of an area within these four personality types. Now you might have seen cross formation, extroversion up here, and then you've got stability going across here. And usually people fall somewhere around, with a combination of these personality types. So let's have a look then. First up, so if you get extrovert as a question, it'll be asking you to kind of understand an extrovert personality, somebody who likes social situations. That will be a descriptor. Done. Okay, you could also use the word outgoing, and I'll put this in here just in case for examples. They're more likely to play team games due to the kind of social interaction involved in them. So, for example, I'll put in here linked it to social situations. For example, netball players socialising or communicating with teammates. Nice and simple. Use your key descriptor. Apply it to a team game. Obviously, that could be any invasion game, and take it from there. Introvert them. So, nice and easy. Use the opposite. Doesn't like social situations, shy, more likely to maybe go towards individual activities. However, if we're keeping our team activity here, if it was a netball player, because obviously introverts do play team games, and you look at this, if it was a netball player, they might avoid communication with the team, they might avoid socialising with teammates. So just make sure you're using that nice easy example just to flip both ways. Then you've got stable. Okay, so if somebody has a stable personality, basically this is referring to how predictable they are. So for example, some of the stable personality is predictable in their behaviour. They do the same things over and over again. And I've used the example here. You could use a number of things. So it might be a goalkeeper making the same decisions all the time. And I've just put here with regard to a netball player reacting in the same calm manner to every referee decision. So, for example, no matter what the referee does, they react the same way, walk off, whatever. So that is something just to give an example of somebody who's predictable. And of course, the flip side to that, you have somebody who's unstable, or what could also be called or termed neurotic. Okay, so very unpredictable. Reacting very differently to refereeing decisions. So, for example, one decision they're fine, another decision they might throw the ball at someone because they're not very happy with it. So, you've got examples there. You can use whatever you want for these, but just a quick example for those different personality types. Now, that's one theorist, that's their approach. Now, in the exam, you could be asked to combine these. So, you could be asked to give a stable extrovert, you could be asked to give an unstable introvert. So you've got to combine your descriptors and just link a team activity to those to make that nice and simple. Okay, so next theorist is looking at Durando. Now, Durando proposed there were two types of personality, and they fell under the banner of type A and type B. Now, there are numerous characteristics from each of these. So just try and keep it relatively simple. Let's go for as follows then. So if somebody has a type A personality, they're prone to high personal anxiety or stress. Okay, those two things are absolutely vital. Okay, so personal anxiety, stress, you be credited for both of those. If you put them as a pair just to be safe, that'd be great. On top of this, it's type of people who are really highly competitive. You could put on this another characteristic is that they work fast. They like to get tasks done quickly, and that's often what causes the stress and personal anxiety. Now, we'll have a look at an example of that. It could be an example if we're looking at a team game again, a football player volunteering to take a penalty. Okay, they're prone to anxiety, stress, but they're also highly competitive. Type B, okay, so obviously flipping it over, not prone to personal anxiety or stress, and they are not competitive or very uncompetitive. So, for example, it might be that a football player not volunteering to take penalties. Okay, or it could be a long distance runner only running for fun, not entering any races. Okay, so anything you want to do in there, there are your examples. So what you will notice on this is it looks like a lot. We're thinking I've got 6 personality types here, and then you're thinking, right, well, I've got to have a different description for each of them and then an example. But really, what I just want to make it very clear to you is it's quite simple to understand and remember these. So I'm going to give you a way to remember them that will allow you to minimize your kind of, I suppose, retrenching your short-term memory or your long-term, or whatever. In order to store these, you should be able to remember just 3 things that will allow you to get 6 marks alongside the example. So let's have a look at that then. So when you're looking at personality types and you're trying to memorize, try this. So if you've got your kind of extroversion, introversion, stable, unstable, let's use this. So if we use the 2 traits at the top here, if we go for introvert, extrovert equals social alert, if you use that as your memory method, that will allow you then quite simply to just remember that extrovert like social situations, whereas introverts do not like social situations. So introvert, extrovert, social alert, done. Now, stable and unstable, if you look on the kind of the 4-point graph of this, they're on across a kind of continuum of stability. So whether you're stable or unstable is based upon stability. So if you use that, stable, unstable, based upon stability, stability equals the degree of predictability. So when you're answering a question on this, you know straight away that unstable, well, you could just use that unstable equals unpredictable, stable equals predictable, and add an example on. And when it comes to type A and type B, when you think of type A, type B, okay, you know there's 2 of them. Think of type A, going, because they are someone who is prone to anxiety and stress. They're prone to personal anxiety and stress. So use the A, imagine someone saying, okay, because they're extremely stressed. All right, link it to anxiety and stress, whereas type B do not have anxiety and stress. And that should give you very minimal stuff to remember there by just using those quick, brief memory methods. Remember, all of these are content qualifiers. That means they have to be in the question if they are wanted as a response. So that then allows you to use these to kind of make sure you can remember them. Okay. Let's move on then. Let's have a look then. So what we're on to now then is the theories of personality formation. So all of us have these kind of individual characteristics that make us unique. And 3 theories propose very different ways in which we form our personality. And the first one is called the trait theory. Now, obviously, these run throughout sports psychology, aggression, leadership. So it's a really important process of understanding these theories. So if we have a look then, we have to be able to explain them. We have to be able to give an example of them. We have to be able to evaluate them. So really important parts of the specification. So trait theory then, what does it propose? Well, it proposes that personality is innate. It's inherited from our parents. It's genetic. Okay, so any personality we have, extroversion, introversion, aggression, whatever it is, we inherit it from our parents. And the things on top of that, so that is specific. That is it. That is how we form it. We don't learn anything. Everything we have in terms of our personality is inherited from our parents. Now, of course, on top of that, it is something that's considered stable and enduring. It doesn't really change that much in it. And these personality types we have last through our life, according to this theory. And it also proposes that it's consistent across situations. So if we have a personality type, we're like it all of the time. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that a boxer, for example, inherits the trait of aggression from the parents, and then they demonstrate it both inside and outside the ring. Mike Tyson, for example, a famous boxer, someone who is aggressive in the ring, obviously to be a boxer, but also was kind of put in prison for GBH. So you've got someone there who demonstrates that trait of aggression in every situation, which makes it consistent across situations. Now, when we are looking to remember this, you could just, obviously there's a key thing here when you think of trait. Okay, you can do 2 things. Trait, you can really kind of, I suppose, exaggerate the I here to remember that kind of trait approach regards to whatever it's about, whether it's aggression or leadership, or in this case, personality. Okay, I, innate. Or you could just say trait equals innate, because that will rhyme, and that just reminds you that that is always the kind of descriptor for how personality is formed due to this theory. And just to make sure we're not getting it confused here, aggression is an example of a personality trait, but it's also a different topic which you can use exactly the same process for. Now, I think it's really important now that we go on to our kind of evaluations. Now, in the exam, your exam technique for evaluations has to be based upon this idea of you've got to give clear strengths and weaknesses. You've got to signpost your answer by saying the strengths, the positives, or the advantages are the weaknesses, the disadvantages, the weaknesses are. Okay, you've got to do that. So let's have a look then. Positives of the trait approach. Okay, so there is some evidence that personality is innate. Okay, and if it is correct, this is good because behavior can be predicted. So if you know somebody has got the innate trait of aggression, this means that you will know that maybe there might be a bit of a risk in certain kind of derby games, for example. You don't need to go into that detail, but that's just an example of how it could work. Now, if I just said to you now the negatives of kind of trait theory, as I'm sure we're all aware, it's very unlikely that just innate input or genetic input is going to dictate our personality. Of course, it's not. Okay. On top of that, it doesn't take into account learned behaviour. And as you'll see on here, when you talk about trait and social, you always get a negative evaluation mark by saying the disadvantage of this approach is it doesn't take into account social learning. Okay, and the same as social learning theory doesn't take into account innate traits. So they're very different theories. Now, what do we need to make sure we're aware of when we are evaluating? I think it's this. So if I said to you on this then, you look here. Now, when you're looking at this, if you look at this idea of saying, right, when you're evaluating, would you understand that innate kind of or inherited personality is what the trait theory proposes? When you're evaluating it, you just have to there is some evidence, not being too committal, but there's some evidence that personality is innate. Okay. And then you're saying, however, personality is unlikely to be completely innate. And you see from that one descriptor there, you have got a double evaluation point. Okay, so that allows you, by using the word innate to describe the theory, you can then say, yeah, there's some positive strengths of the theories, there's some evidence personality types are innate, for example, aggression. However, it's unlikely to be just innate. And from that, you have got two separate strengths and weaknesses that are using the same word, as long as you word it correctly. And on top of that, if correct behaviour can be predicted, as we said there, doesn't take into account learned behaviour. So you've always got the criticism based around the other approach. So let's have a look then at our next approach, which is going to be the social learning theory. Oh, in fact, let's just have a quick look at this. How does this work? So just see an example. A particular sports person there who might demonstrate this trait of, or throw credence at the trait approach to personality, or indeed sports psychology, Luis Suarez. Now, you could say, if you think Luis Suarez, everyone's favourite fighter, okay, he is aggressive. Okay, now, if you were going to look at this, and let's try and pick this up, let's have a look at how this would have worked. So aggression, he is an aggressive footballer, he bites people. So on top of that, you might have a look at Luis Suarez here. This is him as a baby. Okay, so what it's saying, that's his mom, and it's innate. He's inherited the trait of aggression from his mother, and then he's showing it here. Now, obviously I've made that up, that's not Luis Suarez, but you can see how that might work if we go through the process of the trait theory. Finally, our other thing we had to do when describing the trait approach is to say that it's consistent, it's stable and enduring, and it goes across situations. So if you have a look here, this could be Luis Suarez on Valentine's night. As you look here, demonstrating that the trait approach or linked to aggression here, it's stable and enduring, it's consistent, and it's predictable. He's doing it all the time. So you just have that thing in here, get your head in this idea that if he's aggressive, he inherited it from his mother or his father, whatever, okay, and then once he's got it, he uses it all the time. Okay, it's consistent across situations. So that might just give you a little path through. Now, going on then, social learning theory. Now, when we're looking at social learning theory, it's the complete opposition to the trait approach. This theory says it's absolutely ridiculous to suggest that we inherit everything that we show within our personality. So the social learning theory says we don't inherit anything. And every single personality behavior we show is learned. And when we're trying to answer this, it's really important you just interrogate the idea behind it. Because if we're saying it's learned, we have to ask where from, who from, and how does it become permanent? And if we can ask those three trigger questions as key interrogation questions for all of your revision process, hopefully we can build it up. So, where from? Okay, so it's basically saying that we learn every single thing we do from the environment. And in particular of that environment, we need to think who from within the environment do we imitate? Sorry, who from within the environment do we learn this behaviour from? Well, who? We imitate significant others or role models, okay, and I'll put into here at the start, is most likely for the same gender, race, or position of authority. These things make imitation way more likely, and these are really good extension kind of high level vocabulary to put into your answers if you get chance. Okay, so how does it then, if we imitate a significant other or a role model, how does it become permanent? Well, it becomes permanent when it's socially reinforced, okay? And this allows us to create a stimulus-response bond. So we see something in the environment we're in, more importantly, we see someone and we imitate them because they're a significant other. If we imitate them and we get socially reinforced, this creates a permanent behaviour. So if we have a look then at a sporting example for this, so a young player may imitate an older player as kick the ball out of play. So that would be an example of kind of fair play or good functional behaviour or sportsmanship. So a young player imitating the captain kicking the ball out of play when an opposition player is injured. Okay, and this is clapped by the crowd. So this then, if you see that in action, young player, always start your example with a young player. Okay, imitate the captain kicking the ball out of play. That's the significant other, captain. Okay, kicking the ball out of play, and then more likely, because it's kicked out and it's clapped by the crowd, this will create a stimulus response bond via social reinforcement. Now, if we have a look at this, obviously you could turn that into a negative example. Let's have a look at these kind of evaluation points there. So, firstly, I mean, there's one evaluation point linked to kind of a generic social learning theory from the field of psychology, linked to the Bobo doll experiment, which is based around, if you've watched this, based around children watching kind of violent acts towards a doll, some not watching violent acts towards a doll, and it's proposed that the group that watched the violent acts towards the doll were more likely to be aggressive. Okay, so this experiment supports the idea of social learning in a dysfunctional environment there. Okay, so make sure you put that down as an evaluation point. It's a nice, easy mark. And of course, we go back to our general stuff here. We're saying there that this theory proposes that if we have a personality type, we learn it from imitating significant others. So our evaluation point, nice and simply, said there is some evidence that personality can come from the imitation of significant others. So straight away, again, our descriptor allows us to give us a very clear evaluation point as long as we signpost it as a positive or a strength. So if we flip over, of course, we get to use that same descriptor, imitation of significant other, and we're saying here that the flip side to this is we all see role models do things that are dysfunctional. Doesn't mean we copy them. Okay, so although it is an extent, we copy people, but we don't copy everything. So you've got to put onto it. Not everyone imitates role models, particularly when it's dysfunctional behaviour, for example. And finally, it doesn't take into account innate traits. Okay, so that could be an example there. So it doesn't take into account innate traits. So as I said, you can always criticise the opposing theory for that, or use that as a kind of an evaluation point. Now, it might be worth putting here when you put your example. Obviously, you could use the idea of aggression in here again if you wanted to. Obviously, social learning could be an example of aggression. You could use Luis Suarez, or young people imitating Luis Suarez if you wanted to use that. It's absolutely fine. It's up to you what you put for your example. Now, I know in classes, I particularly talked about the idea of Luis Suarez with regard to when he bit someone, and in Liverpool at that point there was something like 60 kind of cases of biting in the playground, and it went up. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it went up massively, and that was just an example of people in Liverpool, Liverpool supporters seeing their role model Luis Suarez biting someone on and then them copying it. Okay, and you could just imagine it happening, how it kind of turns into this kind of, I don't know, like a domino effect as everyone starts doing it. Well, to a certain age, let's hope. So that's the example there. Whichever example you want to put is absolutely fine. Okay, so going on then, final theory then, the interactionist theory. So the interactionist theory of personality basically looks then saying that, okay, it's really, really simplistic to say that you have all of your personality from an innate point of view, you inherit it. And it's also really unrealistic to say that you have your personality from learning from significant others. What's more realistic is there's a combination of these two in action. So the interactionist theory proposes that personality formation is a combination of the trait and social learning approach. So it's a bit of both. And what does that mean? So you're always going to mark for saying it's a combination of these. Now what we need to do is make sure we have a specific understanding of what that means. So, and what we're looking at here is we're combining the innate trait and the environment that the innate trait's in. So, for example, how do they interact? Well, they do it like this way. So it proposes that innate traits, for example, aggression, are only triggered when there is an environmental change. So what does that mean? So, for example, it could be the trait of competitive anxiety. So, for example, the fear of failure is only triggered in a cup final. Okay, the trigger, the situation, or the environment is a cup final, and therefore that is the only time that it brings up that innate trait of competitive anxiety. Or you could say the trait of aggression only, so that innate trait, it stays dormant, but it's only triggered when the environment changes, for example, on the receiving end of a high tackle in rugby, which causes you to become aggressive. Now, obviously, I mean, you look at it and think, surely this is the idea. I mean, this is the one that kind of really holds some credence to us, because we don't all go around like madmen being aggressive, but sometimes you can get triggered by certain environment changes. So if we have a look onto here, then what are the positives? Well, straight away, it's the most credible approach, because it's most likely that we have a combination of traits and socially learned behavior. Okay, and it is more likely that traits are triggered occasionally by changes in environment. So as you can see here, same again, you have got directly from your descriptors, as long as you signpost it as a strength and weakness, the exact key points for evaluation. Okay, so that is it's so easy if you do it correctly. But you've got to signpost it. And the reason what I mean by that is if the question says evaluate and you just put a description and don't make it clear it's a strength or a weakness, you don't get marks. So you've got to make sure you do that. And going on from there, then the negatives of the interactionist theory. Now, the fact that it has innate traits involved in it proposes that you have to inherit traits in the first place. Okay, so the disadvantage of this, or the slight negative, is that it is proposing that trait theory has real credence. Okay, so you have to have innate traits. It completely outplays, I suppose, the social learning. So that's an example of one you can put into there. So if they are your kind of theories done, then there's the evaluations of them. It's a pretty popular place to evaluate in the spec, and of course, by revising these effectively, it allows you to have an understanding of 3 other content areas, obviously, which we'll look at a little bit later. So what I ask you to do then, pause this now. I'm going to ask you to pause it and have a quick go at the quiz at the end. So if you can pause it now, please. Okay, let's have a look then. So answers on there then, if you want to have a quick look and just check you're happy with those, if you give it a quick pause. Okay, right, so let's have a look at some exam questions then. So if you have a look onto here, if you've got this question on here, which is based around evaluate the trait and social learning theories of personality formation. Now, when you see this, the command word is evaluate. It means you have to give a strength and a weakness, strength and a weakness. And make sure you segregate and signpost your answer to allow you to do this. Now, I've put into here trait equals trait, okay, with a big I. Trait, remember, equals innate. If you've got the word innate, that will give you a really, really, really strong chance of being able to get 2 evaluation marks. Of course, also on to social learning. So if you have a look at the answers here, I'll let you have a quick look through those now. And a more simple question you might get on this would be looking at just a basic definition, as long as you know it, and then a nice easy one here on how an individual's personality is formed. Again, trait equals trait, trait equals innate, depending on which way you're going to do it. And then use an example I told you earlier about how stable extrovert. So maybe pause it now if you want to have a quick go at that, and then maybe have a look over at the mark scheme now, which will show you through some examples of those. So just how to combine those 2. So it could be you'd have to have one from here, a description link to an example, and then combine it to another description example from the one down below. Okay, so that's that. Have a look at it. Hopefully you can pick out the things you've learned. Hopefully that is helpful with regard to revising for the exam.